to Excel Tips. My name is Neil Blackwood, and in this video we're going to look at the new Excel function called Stock History. Now this allows you to report on share prices, and you can report on share prices from around the world, but we'll just focus on the ASX, and initially I'm just going to focus on the Commonwealth Bank share price. The Stock History function requires access to the internet because it's going to bring in prices that have been recorded on the various stock exchanges. Now you will notice above the Excel grid here there is a disclaimer, so when you do use this Excel function, Stock History, this disclaimer will pop up basically saying that the information is provided as is and not for professional or trading purposes or advice. So that is the disclaimer you need to keep in mind. Okay, so the Stock History function here is spilling down and across. So this is part of the dynamic array functionality, which I've covered in lots of previous videos and articles. There is only one formula here. The formula is in cell C5. If I click in here, you'll see that the other formulas are grayed out. If you put a value in one of these, you'll get what's called a spill error. The only way to get rid of that spill error is to get rid of the entry there. So the formula is always in the top left cell, and it will spill down and across to populate the report. Now the Stock History report here has three arguments. The first argument is, it's called stock, and that requires two codes. So you need the code for the stock exchange. In our case, we've got XASX, so that's the code for the Australian Stock Exchange. Then the colon, and then the code for the share that you're interested in. I think it's called the ticker code. So CBA is the code for the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. So that's the prices that we're looking at the moment. The second argument is the start date. Now I've put in the 1st of the 1st 2025. That day wasn't a trading day, so just a heads up on that. You will see why in a minute that's important. And then I've got a closing date. Now the closing date, you'll notice, is in square brackets. All of these other arguments in the stock history are in square brackets. When you see an argument in square brackets, it means you don't have to put it in. In this case, I have put it in, so I've put the end date. So you can see that based on these three input cells here, that we've created the report. Now, if I deleted that third argument, you'll notice I get a value error, and that's because this was not a trading day. The 2nd of the 1st 25 was a trading day, and so it's okay, and that will display. So just a heads up, if you put a date in here that wasn't a trading day, so a public holiday or a weekend, then you will get the value error. Now let's just use a few undos, and there we go. And you can see here that the 2nd was the trading day. You can also see that it jumps from the 3rd to the 6th, so the weekends are not trading days, and so there's no prices recorded for those days. Okay, so that's the basics of the stock history. You can get the closing value as the default. So the two entries that are default are the date and the close. In this case, it also defaults for a few other things. We've got an interval, we've got headers, we've got properties. Now, let's have a look at another example where we actually use all of these arguments. So here's a slightly more complex report, and this one is showing all of the values that you can report on. So this stock history is using all of them, as I mentioned. So we've got the stock exchange code with the code, got the start date, we've got an end date here, This one here is the interval, which at the moment is set to daily. So I'll explain how these are working once I've just gone through these entries here. The 2 means that we are including a header. So if I click outside here, so the header is basically telling you what this report is for. So this one is for CBA. So that's what the 2 is giving us. We've got a 0 here, which is the date. So that shows the date. Unfortunately, what they've done with the implementation here is that these are all properties. Okay, so by a property, it means an open, close, low, high, volume. They've all got a different number. Unfortunately, it's not very human friendly. And so what I've done is I've done a few little conversions here to make it a little bit easier to use. So these represent the numbers that are there. Oh, I should mention the interval is also a number. So let's build this. So what I'll do is I'll just delete that, and you can see that clears everything because it's a single formula. So I'll just build the stock history, and the stock code is here, comma, the start date is there, comma, the end date is here. That's a formula which I'll show you in a minute. You can see I'm recording this on the 24th of March. So here we can see the numbers. So 0 represents daily, 1 represents weekly, and 2 represents monthly. Daily is the default, but I want the ability to change that. So I've linked that to a cell, and I'll explain that formula in a minute, comma. And then whether we have no header is 0, show header is a 1, I think that's the default, and then you can show the header with the identifier, which is 2, which is what I've used here. Now here we can see those properties. So 0 is date, 1 is close, and then so what we can do is we can list any of these we want. So if I put a 0, comma, then I can list another one. So if I want the close, if that's all I want, I can just close that whole thing off now, and this will just list for me the entries there with the closing date. But then I can change my mind and say, oh yeah, I might want the opening, which is 2. Okay, and that all updates. And so what I've done with my other formula, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to undo all of that and go back to here. So all of those numbers, instead of entering those numbers, I've got a way to do that using these drop downs. So these drop downs are the columns that we want to report on. And so these are the same ones that were listed there. What I've done is I've put them in column M, and they are in the same sequence as they were in the listing for the numbers. So when you select open, it will return 2, which is using the match function to find that word in this listing. So these names here match the names that were used in the function, and they're the same sequence. So when I look them up, I get the number that represents them that I can use in the formula. In the same way, the daily entry here, if I choose weekly, then you can see my interval number changes, and again I've got that the sequence here. So daily, weekly, monthly is listed here, and so when I select the interval name, I am using a match function. This one's a little bit different because I'm actually deducting 1 from the match function result. The match function returns a number that represents where something is in a range. It's a very powerful function. It's used in a lot of different situations, and as you can see here, it allows us to use inputs, so input cells with like English in it, so that we can then return a number which is being used in the stock history function. So it just makes it a little more user friendly basically. So these drop downs are based on that range, and this drop down here is based on that range. Some of the formulas here, I won't go into too much depth, but the today function returns today's date. That updates automatically, so when I open this tomorrow, it'll say the 25th. I have downloaded a listing from the Australian Stock Exchange, which I'll show you in a minute, that allows me to have a drop down up the top here for the names of the shares. And then I can do a lookup of that in this QASX sheet, which is over here, which we'll look at in a minute, and that's coming from the stock exchange. And then once I've got that, then I'm assuming we're working with the Australian Stock Exchange here, and so I'm just building up the code that the stock history needs. Okay, so I'll just quickly show you this listing here. So this comes from the Australian Stock Exchange. I did a bit of research and found out that they have a CSV that they have hosted on their website. And so if I go to my query here, so this is downloading the listing from the Australian Stock Exchange website. It's basically bringing in the listing. I'll show you the source. So that's the location here. And so we can download the latest listing. Okay, so from the source, I've just amended some of these, like I don't need these top two rows, and I've done a few other things. I've covered Power Query. This is using Power Query. I've covered Power Query in a number of other videos and articles, so you can check those out. But this allows us to basically import the data from the ASX website, and we get the latest data. So when I right click my table here and go refresh, it's going out to the ASX website, grabbing the latest version and bringing that in. And there's the ASX code that we're using, and that's the name. Okay, so that allows us to look up a name. So this drop down here is using the company name column in this table so that we can select the name. So if I choose another one, so let's say CompuShare, that will update the chart. So now we're using a different one. And their code is CPU. Pretty good abbreviation for a computer-based company. The yellow cells allow you to interact with this report, so you can select a single company and see the report. I'll show you an example later where we can look at multiple companies, but this one here is built on a single company. Oh, now I have put a if error on here because the stock history can return an error, and if that comes in, I just get the word none. So if I delete some of these entries, for example, if I delete the name here, then it just comes up with none. You will notice that it does go to busy every now and then, so that's when it's talking to the internet and updating. Okay, so let's see how we can take this and convert it into a chart like this. What we've got here is it's pretty much the same report. I have varied the layout here a little bit in terms of the columns. These columns are used in what's called a stock chart, which I will show you how to build, which is we're looking at on the screen at the moment. I have added an extra error handler in here. This part of the function just checks that we've got 3 inputs in these 3 yellow cells. When you're building the chart, you may find that if you delete entries in those yellow cells that you might have to rebuild the chart. This tries to get around that. It is still possible that I can break the chart. When you see how easy it is to build, it's not a big deal, but just a heads up, if you do delete the entries in here, it can affect, you might have to rebuild the chart. So let's see how we can build the chart. So I'll select the range here, and I'm going to click Insert, Recommended Charts. Unfortunately, it's not listed here, so I'm going to go to All Charts, and there is a stock chart. Now there's 4 different types. They show more and more detail as we move to the right. So I'm going to click on the last one here, and because that's got most detail on it, and click OK. And that's pretty much it. There will be a few things that you can change here. You can click on the chart title, click in the formula bar, type equals, and then click the cell that has the heading. So this tells me this is Commonwealth Bank. Now this does have a couple of sets of grid lines on there. I don't tend to like grid lines, so I would delete them. So that's what I've done here. I will get rid of the legend. It doesn't really help because it doesn't, the only thing it describes is the volume. You need to sort of know what these mean, so I'll just leave this down here and I'll show you on the one that I built earlier. So the way to read a stock chart, the blue columns are the volumes. So you can see it's highlighted the volumes when I've clicked on the chart. So the volumes are on the left hand side of the screen and on the axis, and we can see how the volumes have changed over time. The other shapes represent the price movement during the month. Okay, so let's look at July. So in July, because this is a white box, that means that the stock price increased. So it started out, looks about 120 something. Let's have a look. We started out at 126 and we ended up close at 137. So you can see here that that's what that's measuring. So when there's a white box, it means that the price increased in that month. Now let's have a look on the other end here, and we've got March. I'm recording this on the 24th of March, so that's what it goes up to. And so what this is saying is that as at today, the price has dropped. So let's have a look. So we opened at 158 and we're down to 145. So that's showing that drop. So when it's dark, when it's black, that means that the price has fallen in the month. Now these lines, there's also some vertical lines here. They're interesting. What they represent is they show you the movement. This February is a good example here. So we've got a very thin line for the price movement in February. So if we have a look at Feb, we'll see it kicked off at 156.50 and ended at 156.74. So it didn't really change much in February. So we've pretty much got a horizontal line here. But there's a vertical line, and that represents the low and the high for the month. So if we have a look here, we can see that in February it went up to nearly 168 and it was down to about 149. And so that's what that vertical line represents. So on a single chart here, you can get a lot of information about the various movements of share prices for this particular share, which was the Commonwealth Bank. Now, just a heads up, this report works really well with monthly, but even though I've put daily and weekly here as well, it doesn't work as well for those time frames. Okay, so that's the stock chart, which as you saw is really easy to create. I've got an example here of another chart if you just want to plot a couple of things. In this case, I've actually switched around a few things. So the column chart here is on the left axis, and that is the price. So you can get a gauge for the price, and then the orange line chart is actually plotting the volume. And I have changed the colors of the axis to make that a little bit easier to follow. I've used orange on the right axis and these on the left axis are blue. To create a chart like this, basically select the range, insert, recommended chart, all charts. It's called a combo. So for the closing, I've got a clustered column. For the volume, I've got a line. Now, to put the line on the second axis, you'll notice here that you can't really see very much here. If you change this to a secondary axis, then you can see that's when everything pops up. Because you've got to remember, the volumes are very large numbers, and the closing values are very small numbers in comparison. So you do need to use two separate axes to show the different values. So just using the ticking the box here for the secondary axis, and there we go. And again, we can do the same thing. You can click on the chart title, click in the formula bar, type equals, and click on the cell you want to link to, and that gives us the values. Okay, so one thing you can do to make it a little bit easier to understand, you might not know which axes relate to which thing. So you can click on the axis, you can click on the drop down here and choose a color. So I need sort of a dark orange, that's pretty close. And on the axis on the right hand side, I want to make that blue. So again, we can click here and maybe go for sort of a dark blue there. Something to pick up on this left hand axis, it doesn't start at 0. That's pretty bad for a column chart. So we do need to change that. So if you go Control 1, you can change this start price here from 120 to 0. And then I'm much happier with that as a chart. As I mentioned earlier, I tend to get rid of grid lines on my charts, but that's a personal preference. But there we go. That's how we can create a what's called a combo chart, which combines a column chart with a line chart. As I mentioned, you might want to plot a few more charts. And so what we could take advantage of is the Sparkline chart. So the Sparkline chart plots one data series, and it has a few options that aren't actually in Excel's normal charts. I'll just take you through how we can build this. What I've done, and I'll show you this separately. So we've got a stock history we're using these two numbers across all of them. So that's the start date and the end date. And what I'm doing here is then using the code from there. So the code's coming from B5, and then these two are fixed references, so I can copy them down. So then I'm saying that the interval is 0, so that's daily, and then the headers are 0, so there's no headers on it. So what I'll do is I'll just go down here. So I'm going to copy this and just show you what that looks like here. Okay, so you'll notice that all I'm doing is listing the days and the values, but I want them horizontal. So in Excel, there is a function called TRANSPOSE. And so you can take a vertical report, which is what this is, and just change it to a horizontal report. And so that is what I've done there. Now, in that first line, this formula is different to this formula slightly, because this first line includes the date, whereas in this formula I've got a 1 on the end, and so that means I only want the 1, which was the closing price. Okay, so that's just a heads up. So this formula is a little bit different to that one, but all of these are then the same. These have been copied down. And so these give us all of our individual listings. A little bit of a warning here. When you build a Sparkline chart, as these are, I'll show you how to do that. So right click, so I've just selected them. I'm going to go Sparklines and clear the group. So there's none there now. Oh, that's that one, I'll leave. So what I'm going to do is select that range and go Insert. Sparkline charts are on the other side of the main charts. I want a line chart, and now I need to tell it the range that I want to work with. So that is over here. Okay, and that's the range. So F5 down to Z9. And if we go back, we'll see the charts are there. As I mentioned, Sparkline charts have a few options that are really useful. You can plot a low point and a high point, so you can see where they are in the periods, if you like. Now, as I mentioned, these look like the prices are very volatile, but you can just look at the low and the high in there, and it's not really that volatile. Unfortunately, these do not start at 0. So what we need to do is, if we want to change the axis, and I've already done that on this example, and as you can see, so when you change the vertical axis to 0, then you can see that there's not a lot of volatility in there. So as you can see here, this Telstra, very little change in between these two dates. If you want to see them a little bit more radically, then this does show you the ups and the downs a little bit better, but they're not quite as volatile as they appear, so just be aware of that. To change the axis, basically with the Sparkline selected, you'll have a Sparkline ribbon. Click the drop down, and you want a custom value for the vertical. It actually will have 0 there already. Click OK, and you'll see that converts it. But I'll put that back. So yeah, it's up to you which one you want to plot, whether you want to see it like this or whether you want to see it like that. It's up to you. but just a number of different ways to sort of show the stock history data. And again, to get them sideways, you just put the transpose in front of the stock history. Just a heads up with Sparklines, these do not update. So if I change this to the say the 15th of the 1st, then you'll see it's like just chopping it in half. And if I changed it to today's date, then you'll notice that these actually look the same as they did before because they haven't extended. So at the moment, Sparkline charts do not accept spill ranges. So a spill range has a hash symbol on the end, and the Sparklines will not automatically expand. So just a heads up on that. You will have to, if you wanted to change this to this, you would have to redo the range. So at the moment, what do we go out to? BI. By the way, there's nothing in these cells. When you have a Sparkline, these cells are actually empty. So I'll select those Sparklines, and you can edit the range. And if I change that now to BI 9, then when we go back, we'll see that now we have a different chart. So you do need to manually change these if you're going to sort of manually change those. So just a heads up on that. So the stock history function provides a lot of flexibility to report on shares. As we've seen, that transpose function can change the report to go horizontal if that's what you'd prefer. You can build your reports to work with inputs. As I mentioned, you can download the listing of the company names with the ASX code as well. That can make it a little bit easier to create. We just use an XLOOKUP here to extract the code based on the name. Hope you found that useful, and thanks for watching.